Hello there, folks, and welcome to the stream. My name is Mike D'Angelo, aka That Tellest Guy, and I am joined here by my wonderful co-host, Rihanna.
Hello.
We are doing part 2 of our Atalatha Academy episode of Talking Tellest. It was too much to talk about in one episode, so we cut it in two. Let us resume by talking about the Academy. Rihanna.
Okay, so to recap, in our last session for the Spirit River Academy of Atalatha, name potentially in progress, and poorly done sketch that I threw together today for the school on the screen now, we've already been over the history of forbidden arts, cultural anthropomorphology, arcane grimology, elemental arts, transfiguration and illusory arts, the divining arts, ancient artifacts and the art of enchanting, and now we are getting into our next school of magic, which is the alchemical arts.
I already knew.
Did you?
I somehow knew.
So, the alchemical arts are potions, elixirs, powders, and explosives, and just any sort of brew. Anything that involves combining chemical agents to create something new.
When Gaston goes to the academy and he sees new alchemical arts students, does he get PTSD flashbacks?
He could. He very much could. And here's the fun part. So the professor is a stocky gnome female who loves explosions and creates fireworks for fun. Even though her creations are incredibly precise and she can make everything perfect, she's an agent of chaos and loves all things that go boom. She has a maniacal laugh when things go wrong in her class. The students find it infectious and will laugh along with her, so there's not a lot of, fear of messing up. Unless someone is seriously maimed. A quote that she's often saying, "Are you breathing? Good enough, carry on." She likes collaborating with the other professors on projects, but they insist on the experiments happening in her part of the building since they don't want their classrooms blown up.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah, that's all.
One of the things that I'm thinking is, clearly, the second iteration of the Tellest timeline that we played with saw Blackling trying to lay siege to Atalatha.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in this iteration of the timeline, if anybody was going to try and attack Atalatha, I would imagine that, number one, not all of these people were originally from Atalatha. They've come here because it is a place of
Learning and
of growing
tolerance,
knowledge and everything like that. There's so many talented people here that, if someone was at the walls, they're like, we got this.
Well, so I did actually put that in here. So the idea of the school is that it is neutral. They do not take part in wars. They do not specifically send their students to side with any other beings. Because doing so can hurt basically some of the students there if they're going to attack their homeland. Right. But they will defend the city.
Right.
That's the one
Atalatha
thing.
has been
right.
kind enough to let them have
right.
a sanctuary.
Yep. And
so
it's the professors that lend their skills. They don't have... The students are not a militia. They're not obligated in any way, shape, or form. Their concern is keeping them safe. But the professors will defend the city if called on. So that's the exchange with the city.
I like it.
And to your point, who would be dumb enough to go attacking a city with the greatest minds and magical beings?
Yeah, the talents that are
right.
readily available at this place.
Exactly. Okay, then adjacent.
We were talking about alchemical arts. One of the people who would have a lot of fun here is Mukina.
Is she a Delver?
She's not a Delver, but you would kind of think that because of the white hair.
Right.
But she is one of Renault's childhood friends. She's a big alchemy nut. To some extent, maybe Evelyn Eulis would also have some fun here. She's the one that is impervious to poison. Though there's kind of a rivalry going on between Atalatha and Viscosa right now, so maybe not.
So she might be a fun person for the next one, which is botany. So in here, yeah, the botanical greenhouse. Basically, I imagine it there's leaves everywhere, vines around it. But inside is just like a bunch of different plants and a lot of room to explore, basically. The practical guide to botany classes are identifying and caring for plants with magical properties. The professor is a Lugano male who is particularly well versed in swamp plants and has a tendency to poison himself because tasting is a great way to discern magical properties.
do any of the other proctors, professors, teachers, do they ever like try and sway the students in this class away from that? They're like, don't do that. It's dangerous. Have you ever had poison ivy on your tongue? It's not fun.
Nope. And here's why. He will occasionally wear the effects of magical substances gone wrong. For example, he spent a full month with growing bright pink fur from ingesting a rare fruit.
I like a Lugano with fur.
He talks to his plants and likes to experiment with growing hybrids to cross magical properties. And I think that he is the cautionary tale for the students, because he'll often be like, don't eat that, here's why.
Oh, okay. So he's going, I'll do it for you.
Let's give it a shot. Yeah, exactly. He's an eccentric. But
never ever do this.
No, right. Now, this is why I said it's basically a liberal arts college. Most of the people here are a little insane, but that's what makes them brilliant, and that's what makes them interesting. So he has this vast knowledge because he went there. Like he
just
has
imagine
intimate knowledge.
This guy is like a perpetual ayahuasca trip.
Exactly.
I also like imagine him as like, we've got like the Lugano are like lizard folk of all kinds of, you know, appearances and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I imagine him as having like a little bit of like fuzz off like his, like it almost looks like a beard,
like a goatee.
Yeah.
I like
maybe like a soul patch that kind of like a fringe.
Yep, I like it a lot. We're going to move up now to strain ecology and draconic physiology. So this is the class, I imagine, taught by Androckitus.
Mm-hmm.
It's
That's
not
his tower next door.
It's his tower next door. The classes are not taught in his tower. His tower is like one of the off-limits parts of the school.
Right, because he still lives there, right?
He still lives there, and also he houses like things that are not in the library. Like, this is where I would imagine, like, the forbidden textbooks are actually, like, stored. So he's entrusted with that kind of knowledge. So strain ecology and draconic physiology is a study of the magical creatures within Tellest and how they exist within their surrounding ecosystems, with particular focus on dragons and their origins.
Right, he is definitely the Draco Sage within the timelines that we've explored. He's got a little companion named Styx, who resides in a sphere at the end of his staff. She's a fairy dragon that can grow and shrink in size. So,
yep, and the fairy dragon is kind of what made me think that he should also be the one to do like the ecology and other things, because it, like, even down to Luma bugs, like, they are creatures that reside in their own habitats. So he would have that kind of knowledge, because dragons encompass a lot of different species. Like, there's the big classic, you know, huge dragons. There's different kind of drakes. There's wyverns. There's
the tyrants.
Right. There's serpents. Like, there's so many different
worms and stuff like that.
And then those relate to other creatures in some way, shape, or form. So
I do like the idea of like Gaston being a frequent either visitor or guest proctor here as well, because he's very much the study of people with abilities.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that they would all get along really well.
Yep.
So Androckitus is well liked by the students. Good-looking younger dude, but some find him intimidating. He's friendly and cordial to all, but has a temper when his own studies are disturbed. He has his own library in the tower that is off-limits except or unless by invitation, but he often consults with the Grimology professor on ancient texts. His tower is the cornerstone of the academy and also generally secluded.
Yep.
So
I like it.
Yep. And then we have this little, like,
the Deism Evocation Temple?
Yeah, so I imagine that as sort of like a stained glass topper to it, not in the same way as like a church, but just generally
Kind of
speaking.
cathedral-y looking.
Yeah, like a conduit subsection of the school. Deism, Theology, and Evocation is a non-denominational look at known deities, sects, and famous clerics or spiritualists in history, and includes the study of divine healing. So, essentially, a school of theology dedicated to, like, understanding the gods that exist in the world. Because, as we've discussed, the gods are real things within Tellest. Like,
Right.
it's not conceptual, this is a powerful
Right. I've seen this
being.
person before.
Right.
You know, like, we have written texts
Right.
that confirm this.
It is a being of power that can imbue you with that power if you do X, Y, Z.
So, this is obviously, like, the notion of it from a, like, an academic perspective, but is this part of the academy also where clerics would learn?
It wouldn't be where the clerics learn how to, like...
Cast healing spells and stuff like that.
Well, no, they can do that. It's basically the beginning steps of forming the relationship with your deity or understanding which deities are available to you.
Okay.
Because, like, I imagine, okay, you've completed your studies here, you've decided, like, who you want to devote your life to because that's the path that you're on. You're now going to study in this temple devoted to this person, and you can learn more about them in this area. But this is the professor is a former Kaja priestess in training. Her tribe was visited by missionaries from many lands, and rather than following any one, she wanted to study them all. She was cast out as a heretic because of that, but she found a home in Atalatha. She and Andrakidis are friends and colleagues who share a common interest in dragons, because the Kaja have the dragon connection. They could be more than friends, but she doesn't appreciate his lack of interest in deism as a legitimate form of magic. He calls it cheating. She thinks he's hypocritical by drawing on dragon powers. They bicker often. It's a bit of a will they, won't they, as, like, the studies go on. She has the unique affinity for conversing with multiple deities, creating a sort of understanding that her purpose is to demonstrate various powers to potential devotees without dedicating herself to a single entity. So her power is basically being a conduit for different deities who don't require her. Like, she's created, like, a non-exclusive contract with multiple deities to say, like, I will allow, like, in granting me your power for this purpose, I'm showing others what they can expect from a life dedicated to you. But we don't have an exclusive relationship.
So I was originally kind of conceptualizing what this would be like and thinking, like, there's so many gods and goddesses and theisms in the Tellest universe. Like, we're talking about gods from every race.
Yep.
Some of them might be the same, but just, you know, conceived of in a different way. What I had originally thought was, like, okay, like, every race is going to have to, like, send, like, an ambassador to do these kind of things. And then I was thinking, like, well, I mean, you've got, like, the teachers who roll in the cart and show what's on, like, a video real quick. And I was thinking, like, the Tellest equivalent of that is, like, in the stained glass, perhaps you could have, like, a message that has been, you know, like, written in magic that is then played back over and over and over again. So you could have the perspective of something like that. And then we moved on to this Kaja professor who has the ability to kind of circumvent the need to do that. But the thing is, you're saying that because of her ability, she can talk to any of the gods, goddesses, any of that stuff. But there's got to be times where the gods and goddesses don't want to be talked to. And I wonder if it's a situation where, and this is your idea that we're piggybacking off of, so if you don't like this, whatever. Perhaps it's not that she's talking with the god directly, but she's talking with, like,
their secretary.
Not necessarily their secretary, but, like, the aura of the god. Like, she can find a way to to kind of convert. You know, like how we were talking about the Netflix show that we watched, where like AI is going to basically like reconstruct you when you die, so that when you go to someone's grave, you can have a conversation with that person. Kind of like that. Like she can take the concepts of the god and then make a like a experience based off of that.
So the way I imagined it was like less of a direct like verbal conversation and more of like capturing a pool of essence.
Yeah.
So like she knows she's been given permission basically to dip a toe in multiple pools.
Right.
And
it's her form of divination almost.
Yeah, and to draw from that as needed for the purpose of like first of all, she's good at healing magic. I imagine like she would be very good at healing because she can draw on multiple power sources.
Right.
It's not just the one. She's flipping all the switches when she needs to like heal somebody. So I imagined, but like her purpose is I'm using this magic to heal and to bring others to you and to show that to show them the options.
Yep.
Not there's no like force, there's no like the reason I said it's non-denominational is because in this instance it's not blind devotees. This is a proven entity you are going to devote your life to in exchange for this, which I'm showing you. You may choose whatever you want or none of them. Like,
I like it.
I wish the world was like that.
Well,
you know?
The reason that I brought it up was because we obviously in the world of Tellest have certain things that have happened to gods, by gods,
Right.
all that kind of stuff. So it kind of makes it a little bit more friendly to be able to have something where you don't really know that, you know, what's on the other end. Did a god die, and does she lose access to that, or is that knowledge still there?
Ooh, that's an interesting. So I imagine she would lose access to the power source because if a god dies, their power is extinct at that point.
Right.
Like it's forfeit, and
Right.
you can't draw on that power anymore.
If we were talking about like a variation of a god who, like, if someone killed them and got their powers, would she be aware of the font but not the wielder? Like,
Yeah, that could be. So, like, maybe her access to it is muddied in some way because, like, it was a transfer of power, but that power still exists. She just has to find the channel again.
right. And then the other thing that I was thinking of was, like, again, we're talking about a world where, like, the gods kind of showed up at the same time in some instances as the other races may have. You know, like the elves and the dwarves had like their concept of, you know, spirituality and deism and stuff like that before humans came back, before gnomes showed up, before kobolds and kajas and stuff like that. If a new god were to appear, would she be aware of that presence?
I think so. I would imagine, like, the relationship is, like, a meditative, like, experience. Like, not so much, again, not really an exchange of words, more of exchange of, like, tapping on, like, knock knock, can I have a little bit for this purpose? Okay, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Because the gods of Tellest are very much like the Greek idea of gods.
Yeah,
like
it's kind of pantheon-esque.
Right. They're flawed entities that interact with each other in some ways. They can be angry at each other, they can get together and create new ones. Like, you know, it's a different, not a race, like a different type of being, a celestial being, you know. But I do like the idea of her and Androckitus having some bickering stuff, because like they could be, you know, like I think that I like the idea of Androckitus believing that true power is with like that draconic energy, and thinking that like not in like disdain wise, but just like I don't need a deity telling me what to do. And she's like, but your dragons kind of tell you what to do.
I would imagine that he doesn't think that that's like where all magic comes from or anything, but I think that he might think that it's a distinct kind of magic that might be more important, perhaps, or like purer or something like that. I have to get to the root of that.
Yeah, but I think it would be a fun dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to switch gears a little bit to combat training and defensive arts. So this is non-magical fighting skills and defensive arts only, which may include like minor ward magic and things like that. The professor is one of the knights that we discussed was Igor?
Hegor.
Yeah.
Not Igor.
Igor.
So Hegor was one of the Knights of Virtue who journeyed to Blacklane to rid them of a mad king named Groark who was basically resurrected and was causing a whole bunch of issues. There was 8 mighty knights who went up there. 7 of them have since settled in Raleigh. The 8th one is Warwick Fagin, who is basically the king of Crassius. Warwick passed away, and Artemis kind of is the king now. Fun fact: we talked in the last episode about the blocky thing. Artemis and Warwick are named after the person who did the blocky thing for Atalatha.
Cute.
So fun fact.
That is a fun fact. So the professor is one of the knights that you mentioned. Older and non-magical, but he's seen some stuff in his career and wants to teach others to be responsible with combat. He guides basic training for wards and other defensive spells. He teaches the history of great wars and combat strategies for those interested in military careers or knighthood. He helps his students hone their bodies for battle while incessantly reminding them of the potential consequences for their actions if they are too aggressive, essentially.
Yep.
He connects particularly skilled students with trainers who specialize in different styles of battle and weaponry. He has many contacts with different warriors that he's met over his years.
Yep.
In
So,
profession.
in the original trilogy, in the last timeline that we explored, Hegor was the one who kind of ran the pits underneath the library of Atalatha. The pits probably still exist to some extent. He wouldn't be the one managing that anymore because something like this exists instead.
So I have something under the school, but it's caverns.
Right,
So
and I would imagine that maybe what we do is over time we connect the two.
maybe the pit was flooded
Something
to become the caverns.
And obviously Hegor was he was like a father figure to David. The reason being, David ended up losing his father after his father came back home from the war, having lost a leg. Couldn't protect himself when the Centurion, which is the inn that they owned, burned down. But because the influence of the gods is a little bit more relaxed in this timeline, he never ended up in a war that was so brutal, and instead he came home basically wound free. So he was able to survive the attack that happened in his inn. David never ended up being orphaned, basically, and never ended up getting raised by Hegor, essentially. But we do know that in this timeline, David has become basically like the most renowned warrior because he's kind of like the champion of the Colosseum. So
I like that.
Hegor probably knows him based on that.
So he can send people to him to train. I also like if Hegor was in a war in Blacklane, or like fought in Blacklane, it's fun that he's near the Transfiguration guy from Blacklane, so they can have some fun. He could be like all weary of like, oh no, this guy, and he's like, hello, we're gonna have fun with this.
Yeah, it's the Blacklanian warriors that we fought they were barbaric, they were brutal. Sup, buddy?
And I like the idea of like messing with him. So like he's fighting with like combat dummies, and then this the Blacklanian Transfiguration guy turns like the dummies into like, I don't know, big bunny rabbits, like something ridiculous, and he's like, "Will you stop it?"
Yep, I could definitely see that being a thing.
The swords are suddenly turned into flower bouquets, like.
Oh, Lucinda's gonna like him. You know what? You know what? Here's the thing about Lucinda going to the Transfiguration place. They are so alike that she would have only fallen in love with him had he not been super gay.
That's kind of, well, you know what? I imagine that's not going to stop her. What are you talking about? She's Lucinda. I just imagine that somebody who is well versed in the art of turning anything into anything else is going to be theatrical.
Yeah.
If you have, like, the ability to take whatever's in your imagination and make it real, how are you not going to have fun with that in every aspect of your life? Like, what are you going to do? Have beige walls? Like, no. You're going to have purple peacock feathers.
Beige,
like,
please.
Exactly. It's going to be opulent. If you don't have to live in a hovel, you can live in a castle because you can create it from your mind. You're gonna do some weird stuff. You're gonna be weird.
It's absolutely true.
So I love that for them. Politics and diplomacy. So that is under, like, this dome area under the Phoenix statue. I kind of imagined that with, like, those are supposed to be, like, pillars, kind of Parthenon-y, yeah. So it is for understanding the political geography and philosophy of different schools of thought and the art of speechcraft, for those interested in governing bodies, laws, and the justice system as a whole. The professor is Alicia Maine's mother. She's a human female who spent much of her life observing Atalathan politics and is skilled in the art of debate. She is a well-known figure in Atalatha and often serves as the representative for the school as a whole. Her negotiation power is unmatched. She is sometimes flustered by the hot Rhinotaur professor, but only in a good-natured and jokingly way, because she knows it embarrasses her daughter Alicia, who takes classes at the school.
And I would imagine, to some extent, bothers Elton as well.
But it's like a oh my kind of, like a joking, put your muscles away kind of a thing.
So this was a fun one for you and I to discuss because in the original timeline, in both of the original timelines, Alicia's mother did not make it out alive. She was probably, in both cases, one of the first people who meets her end. For whatever reason, like, I'm predisposed to the idea that, like, superheroes need to lose loved ones.
Most heroes don't have parents.
Right.
Or at least have missed one, including Disney princesses and stuff.
And that's one of the things that I'm trying to get away from, because it's so cliche, and I want to show that anybody can be a force for good.
Exactly.
So
and anyone can be a force for bad, too. Like, just because your parents are good doesn't mean the child can't be bad, and it doesn't mean that the child has to be bad if both parents are bad. Like, it can be any combination. And I think that it's more interesting to have both of them alive at this point, and especially have the mom be, so Elton was sort of like the main because of the last name.
He was the driving force.
He was the driving force, and I kind of like the idea of the mom being more of a prominent figure in this. Not that she's the one, like, signing documents or anything in the city, but she's the one that has, like, we have to be, we have to watch ourselves around her, because she's literally, like, one of the figureheads of the school itself.
She's got a lot of influence, even if she's not the head of state, so to speak.
Right. She's a figure that demands respect, and the way that she presents herself and is eloquent and obviously teaches, like, structured debate among different cultures and, like, what the different governments mean. She has a vast wealth of knowledge.
Right.
She's not a magic user.
Right.
So
and I like that. And it's got to be interesting to see her daughter at the school learning all different kinds of magic and different subjects and stuff like that. The interesting thing is that because Alicia's mother is with us now, Alicia doesn't have to step into the role that her mother does. So I would imagine that, yes, she's probably teaching a lot of things here, but if there is an item that requires some kind of diplomacy, she's going to be the champion in that regard. So there's probably a good chance that we talked earlier about, like, the Knolls being, like, added to a treaty between Atalatha and Warris, there's a good chance that she probably had some kind of foundational input in that coming to pass.
Yep. And she would probably utilize, like, the arcane grimology professor's linguistic skills to, like, you know, here's how we're going to approach this conversation with, like, you know, with this class of Knowles. Maybe they didn't speak English, or maybe he revises the contracts or something. Like, I think her skill is using the right people for the right purpose.
Yeah,
and
she's got a
terms.
skilled administrative team.
Exactly. She's a if Hermione Granger was a headmaster, except the school doesn't have a headmaster, and I'll get into that too.
Right.
This is the most me character. So you're gonna go down to the
magical anomalies.
Magical
anomalies.
The
magical anomalies.
Magical anomalies and creative spellcraft. So this is a philosophical look at unexplained events across Tellest. It encourages research and hypothetical magical solutions to theoretical magical problems. Any weird situations, any weird variants of the strain, anything that's just obscure, unexplained, would be on a Netflix documentary, like Unexplained Mysteries or whatever. Unsolved Mysteries.
Wild magic.
Wild magic. This is that field of study. The professor is a very weird witch who is best friends with the Logano herbologist and also very willing to ingest mystery herbs. She's well-traveled and always fascinated in stories and lore. While she's eccentric and sometimes other professors doubt the validity of the stories she tells, there's no doubt that she's a creative spellcrafter. She's invented brand new enchantments, spells, potions, and even bardic poetry that when sung can influence emotions.
Is this witch human?
She's a human.
Okay.
I kind of imagined her Asian. I don't know why. We don't have a lot.
Are you secretly Asian?
I could be. No.
She's the most like me.
No, the herbology part of it, and the like, just being interested in weirdness, and creativity. The arcane grimology professor is fascinated with her, but also jealous of her ability to conjure new types of magic rather than recycling the ones from old texts. She tries to teach him how to unlock his creative side, but he gets frustrated and self-conscious. She teaches those who have unique powers that don't necessarily fit into other schools of magic and helps her students embrace their uniqueness. So I figured, with essentially the liberal arts idea of this school, there's going to be a category that doesn't fall into any of the other categories.
And she's kind of the catch-all.
This is like the creative writing art class of the entire thing. Like, if you don't have something that falls into the other category, Bubbles would be a good example. Like, she's not really in the, like, she could dabble in elemental magic, but like her power is so unique that she could have fun in this iteration of it. I also like the idea of magic not being a stoic, like, set parameters, like math, you know, basically. Like, she can create new spells. She can manifest new items.
I like it.
And I think that in a place that's dedicated to academic pursuits, you need a forward thinker, because who the heck wrote all of the ancient stuff that they're studying but creative thinkers who are inventing new things?
Yeah, you're talking about Shakespeare, who created new words and stuff like that,
Exactly.
but she's the equivalent with magic.
Right. Oh, I love that. That gave me chills. Good job. But yeah, that's the idea of, like, she can create new items, and her unique perspective is obviously valued by a lot of the other professors, because she thinks so outside of the box that if they're trying to solve an issue, she could be like, well, have you thought of using peanut butter? I don't know. But, like, whatever the situation is, like, somehow it makes sense.
We are going to commit to that, and they're going to beat, like, a final boss in, like, a saga 20 years from now by using peanut butter.
I love it. And
he went into anaphylactic shock.
Right. He was allergic the whole time. The alchemist, magical anomalies, and botany is all in this same area with a little garden. Because I imagine all of them would be like have need of a garden,
Right.
resources for like agents and stuff for their stuff. And then the final school is arcane engineering and the study of dimensional rifts. So essentially, the idea is it's a class exploring travel by land, air, sea, or portal magic. Field trips galore. So the idea is like, we talked about airships being a thing. We talked about, like, more of a steampunk vibe in Tellest going forward. And I like the idea of there being a school dedicated to engineering because it's forward thinking. It's not necessarily magical by nature, but it can be powered by magic.
Right. You're using some kind of magical components that exist to you in the world to... I would imagine that this school of thought would be more for people who don't have the ability innately, but are able to conceptualize how to use what's available to them to make items.
They're builders. They're crafters.
Yep. So we know that, like, within the world of Tellest, to make an airship, one of the things that you need is, like, wood from a cordis tree, for instance, because the trees were the ones that were responsible for keeping Chandronar aloft at one point.
Right.
Things like that.
The floating island wood.
Yep.
The professor here is a dwarf male who comes from a long line of mountain dwellers, but long to fly and travel the watery depths rather than staying under the shadow of the mountains.
Oh, he's got a good friend in the gnome from Heart of the Forest who is trying to develop a submarine.
Yeah, I like it. He's loudly opinionated and unbothered by most things. If he doesn't like something, he'll let you know about it. He yells at the students, but it's constructive. He'll yell compliments in the same tone as criticisms. He and the forbidden arts professor often get into loud arguments, but they respect each other and will often yell things like, "You're an idiot! Are we still on for lunch?"
I like it.
That is it for the professors.
Yeah, but we do know that one of the guest professors for the arcane engineering would be Maximus,
Of course.
who already would be in the school for
the enchanting and the magical artifacts. So I imagine there's a lot of overlap, but I feel like Maximus with his, like, the tinkering and stuff, I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a school for tinkering, but if someone has that kind of affinity, they would be sent to
I would say
Maximus.
he has some kind of,
Well, we also
interest in arcane engineering. Right. He also, we haven't written this into being yet, but he very much is, he's a theist, Richard believes in, like, the whole concept of, like, a solitary god who oversees everything. Maximus very much believes in the gods because he identifies with Galvin, the god of crafts.
Right. So he'd be hanging out in the temple a little bit.
Yep.
Like, yeah, I think that it's more of, like, these are collaborative hubs with specialized classes. And I think we also talked about Maximus not wanting to widely teach his inventing skills because of
because in the third book that we're going to explore with him, and it was beyond
it
that
was like
well,
an entity sort of uses, like, some dark magic to influence the machinery that he creates, and he's like, this is not something that should be in multiple people's hands.
Right. In fact, he might have some friendships with the
history of the Forbidden Arts.
Yes. So it would be fun for him to do that. We also talked off the air about one of the other guests who might show their way to the arcane engineering portion of the school, that being Wispus, because if you need something to be traveled far and you can't do it easily, why not find the artificer who can
make things shrink.
So make an airship or a boat, a ship in a bottle.
Right. And also Rowentis, because we talked about him being well versed in portal magic. So if he's creating, like,
Well, and Roentis is versed in portal magic because of the
Whispus
artifact that
and the
Whispus has,
artifacts.
which is the Bracer of Travel.
Right. And he would be good with the enchanting stuff because he creates wands. So
Right.
I think that there's a lot of overlap here.
Yep. And the Arcane Engineering School, since you were talking about like portal magic anyway, would they be the ones to talk about, for instance, like the Nexus?
Ooh.
Or
yeah.
is that more deism?
So
Or is that
So I would
magical
say,
anomalies?
I would
Or do we
say-
need a new school, a new place for that concept?
I would. So here's my take on it. Like, when we talk about healing and stuff, right? There's not a school for healing, but you have elements of that in botany, in potions, in the deism. Like, it spreads across those. The Nexus is a place, right? Like, it's a reality that they know about.
Mm-hmm.
So I would imagine that knowledge of it is just peppered through, like, it relates to each of
Many of the different
items. Yeah.
I like it.
And I think there's a lot of overlap with different aspects of Tellest in here, like that, like poisons or like weaponry and stuff
There's,
like that. There's going to be overlap.
Right, there's pieces of it that might be taught in like various different things.
Right. Behind the school are dormitories, an eating hall, and a ballroom. Beneath the school are caverns. So we'll get into a little bit more about the school here. So the school does not have a headmaster. They have a parliament made up from the professors. Decisions are made by group consensus with foundations in historical precedents and hypothetical outcomes. The divination professor guides decisioning by vibes. There are 15 schools of magic currently, or 15 schools of learning currently. Their only rule is majority rules, so they must always have an odd number of representatives from each school of magic. So, for example, they're not going to add, like, one other school of learning and have it be 16. It would have to be 17 at that point.
Right, which is why you didn't like the idea of something that taught the Nexus or the afterlife specifically.
I don't hate that idea at all. I just think that it has to be in line with the 17, and I think that there's an opportunity for the story itself to be about adding 2 more schools.
Right.
So that would be fun. Also, a professor may substitute another expert in their field to take their vote if they are unavailable or want to defer to someone else for decisioning. So, like, I would imagine if there's something that they're voting on that's personal to one of them, they can recuse themselves from that vote and give it to somebody else.
Important people recusing themselves from something that, unprecedented.
I know, right? You would imagine that it would be fine. The school is based on meritocracy, so the most qualified teachers teach. And it's not necessarily like the best at their craft, it's the best at teaching their craft.
Right.
So the idea is, like, if you are a brilliant potions person, but you're terrible at communicating, or you're just like an awful person, like, you're not going to be a teacher at the school.
You fold it in.
100%. So that's how they base it. Like, you have the charisma to lead in this instance, and you're an authority on it. So that's how they make the decisions. They each will make the decisions for their own schools, but regardless of their personal opinions, they all respect each other's value to the school and to the city of Atalatha. Their collective mission is to empower and guide all of those who attend to be a force for advancement and for the future of Tellest through education, innovation, and collaboration. That's their... What is that kind of brand namey?
Goop.
You almost made me spit out my water. Oh, that was funny. Shut up.
Excuse me, I'm going door to door selling these jade eggs.
Oh, no! No, not that. The school does have a detention system, and the detention system, or the disciplinary system, is threefold. A level 1 offense is for light rule breaking, which everyone does at some point, like just disrupting the class or whatever the situation is. Wait, I lost it.
detention system.
Here. So light rule breaking, the punishment for that is helping the professors do menial tasks. So organizing, cleaning, whatever. It's just like a, how dare you just, like, inconvenience me, I'm
Right.
going to inconvenience you in return. A level 2 offense involves cheating, lying, name-calling, disrespecting others, trespassing, fighting, etc. It's a more serious offense, but not so serious that, like, they're criminal.
Right.
So these are met with suspension from the magical studies for an appropriate time to the offense, and mandatory completion of community service, which may include cleaning out stables, caring for the ill,
Is it something
agricultural
specific to the
field
city,
work.
or is it?
It's going to be proportional to the offense. So I imagine very much like eye for an eye. Like, oh, you're going to, like, you've been fighting with this person. You're now going to go care for the elderly in this
I
facility.
like how it's the opposite of eye for an eye.
What?
It's like the idea of eye for an eye is like, oh, you hurt me, I'm gonna hurt you. But your concept is, oh, you hurt me, you're gonna help someone else.
Right.
Now.
That's true. It's the opposite. It's a learning experience. So, like, if you're I don't know, if you're caught cheating on something, then your recompense is to
tutor someone else.
Tutor somebody else in this. Like, it's supposed to be constructive because essentially the offense is like an offense of passion. Like, you had a bad,
Right.
you did something wrong, you're now going to make it right. We're going to give you the opportunity to make it right.
Right.
However, a level 3 offense involves intentionally and seriously causing physical harm to another student, performing forbidden arts, proven, like not just suspected, but proven to have performed any of the forbidden arts, trying to basically hurt the reputation of the school or do something to, like, sabotage, like, what they're trying to do there. So this constitutes a tribunal to decide the proper response. While awaiting a decision, their powers are bound, and they are confined to a holding cell in the caverns below the school, so that they're not a danger to anybody while they decide.
That's their Azkaban.
That's their Azkaban. Each of the but it's not inhumane.
Right.
Like, that's the idea.
They're in timeout.
They're in a magical timeout, basically. While
Mage
awaiting,
cuffs.
Yeah. Each of the professors will meet with them regarding what they did, why they did it. Punishments may include probationary return to class, therapy or mentorship, expulsion from the school, banishment from Atalatha, transference to a secure holding facility if it's a serious offense, or in severe cases, permanent magical binding along with any combination of the above. The decision also involves the parents or next of kin to the individual. They can be released to the relative's custody without binding their magic, but the relative will essentially be punished for future crimes committed by the student.
Which is kind of what we're seeing now with, like, gun crimes in the United States, where parents are being held responsible for, like, the child getting control of a firearm that maybe they shouldn't have had.
So the idea is this is not this is not a disciplinary institution. It's a place of, like, learning. You can, like, if you're, let's say your, child or your spouse, your father, like, whoever the entity is, if they tried to harm others, you're saying release them without binding their power, without creating, like, some sort of safeguard in the future because you're vouching for them, their actions are on your head. So there's some sort of...
Does that apply to anybody? Like, Luca and Adelia's parents are nobodies, like...
Only if the person is vouching for the individual. Like, if they're saying, you're not going to do anything to this person because I am going to take responsibility for them, like, on my own.
Well, and that's why I'm asking. Like, if
it
Alicia...
applies to anybody.
Okay.
If Alicia... We talked about Alicia having sort of an affinity for that forbidden knowledge.
It's true.
If she does something that is contrary to the school and her mother vouches for her, then Alicia goes and kills somebody, her mom is responsible. But the mom could also say she messed up, her punishment
Right.
is
I'm not going to
like,
jeopardize my spot in the school.
right,
Something like that.
It depends, but that's all based on a binding contract that the students must sign prior to entering the school. So the trade-off is you are welcome, anyone is welcome to learn at this school, but you need to follow the rules, which are respecting everyone. This doesn't account for mistakes. If you mistake, like if you blow
Yeah, if it's an
something up,
accident.
yeah, if you blow
If
something
you're in
up
the
in the professor's
alchemical
class,
arts, yeah.
right, like it's not a punishment response. It's a whoopsie doodles, let's teach you how to do better. We're going to heal this person from the mistake that you created, like whatever the situation is. Excuse me.
You're exposed.
The school costs nothing for the students outside of the contract for entry. The condition of continuing your studies is simply passing each level of schooling. There is a small tax from the city folk that's orchestrated by the city, but most of it is funded by benefactors from around the world. However, all contributions to the school are anonymous, so no one has influence over how things are run. Contributions are often in the form of items of value that could be dangerous in the wrong hands, so they are entrusted to the school for safe handling. Since it is largely sustained by and maintained by magic, there's not many costs really associated with running it. Anyone is welcome to the school. There's no restrictions provided you agree to the terms. You start at level 1 in any school and advance from there. You can retake classes indefinitely until you pass. If you lack the aptitude to keep up with your classmates, you're encouraged to self-study the basics and join again at a later time, or explore another school of learning. You can take as many classes simultaneously as you can handle. I also don't think there's any cap. So, like, you could have 300 people to a class because they can just magically expand it, or you could have 3 people in a class. It really doesn't matter. It depends on the volume in the city at the time.
Yeah, it's true.
And if it's magic, they're not going to lack resources for everybody. They can...
Yeah, I'm imagining, like
multiply
we've
things.
kind of explored in the April Fools, like the Cal Arbor Groves, where, like, there's a semi, like, pocket of reality inside our own.
Mm-hmm.
So you can almost layer fourth dimensionally, like, all right, we only have room for 30 students in this class, but let's do that kind of notion, and now all of a sudden there's a completely brand new area that didn't exist before.
Right. So as if, like, someone was... Not really, but, like, the most I guess modern example would be like it's a Zoom meeting. You can have like 3,000 people and one professor, and you're all learning from at the same time.
Right.
Speaking of dimensional stuff, most students reside somewhere in the city. Like they all have homes in the city, really.
But you did mention that there's the dormitories.
Yeah, but some reside in the school lodgings, particularly those from faraway lands visiting the city purely for study. They don't have jobs; they're just there to learn, essentially. The lodgings are magically expanded, and each room is, like, magical password protected, basically. So there's no concern for dividing races, ages, or genders. Anyone seeking a room other than their own inevitably ends up getting lost and redirected to their own room. A Minotaur helped with the labyrinthian design of the lodgings.
I like it.
I like the idea of, like, you have the entire school as a common area, essentially, so you can interact with anyone at any time, but, like, when it's time to go to bed or study in your own room, you have the privacy you need.
Right.
Like, no one's gonna bug you. Let's see. There's a common dining hall that caters to all types of palates. The food is unremarkable, but whenever there's an event, a transfiguration chef will enhance the basic meals to fine dining feasts. So, like, I imagine with many different races, you're going to have many different types of food that need to be served. And you can serve them, like, chicken, vegetables, like, fish, whatever it is. But it's a fish versus, like, a fancy...
Right, and then the transfiguration person is what's making it fancy.
Right, and they're, like, instead of just sitting there like, oh, it needs to be spiced and seasoned and perfectly, like, it's a bland piece of chicken, but... you've added, like a cordon bleu to it. And then the city will occasionally entertain delegates in the dining hall or ballroom. The school is neutral ground and will not partake in wars or use the students as military fodder, The professors will, however, help defend the city against attacks when necessary.
Right, which we talked about, I think, in part 1.
Yep. And that is it. That's all the stuff I figured for the school. I imagine the caverns kind of like, for some reason I imagined like water running under it, so maybe it's like an offset of the Spirit River.
Yeah, I can see that, some kind of subterranean
right.
river.
And if it's kind of a holding cell, maybe the river itself is sort of like a penitent kind of vibe to it, like being in there and just hearing the Spirit River like washing down, like maybe creates
a little bit
like
of the deism
right.
stuff.
Like
they travel there from time to time.
Yeah, so I like it. I think that it's a very fun approach to. Oh, a high five I got. I think it's a very fun approach to the school.
I do too, and you already talked about how you want to tell like an entire story about.
Oh yeah,
stuff that's going on.
I'm writing this stuff, and I have one other fun thing for you, but I didn't want to put it online. I sketched out the professors.
Oh yeah, you did.
I didn't want to share that with the internet because it's so bad.
So Rihanna is wonderful with like traditional art. She's wonderful with like she makes like brilliant wands. She makes brilliant everything.
I sketch poorly. I doodle real bad.
People are not your forte. You, I mean, you're better than me. My stick figures
they're
are not
blocky. Mm-hmm. They're blocky for sure, but that's the.
But we know how I feel about blocky things.
Right.
So
but that's the general vibe, and I think that it's a really good group. I think there's seven females, and then we have the most that we have are like 4 human males, but overall there's a lot of different.
You figure, I mean,
races,
it makes sense because Atalatha itself, with the proximity to the school, is going to have people that represent the people who've lived here the longest.
Right, and you have a good combo of those people, of the humans being a mix of magical and non-magical folk.
True.
So I'm real excited about it, and I hope you like it because it's happening.
Well, this has definitely been the longest that we've ever sat here doing our show.
Sorry, I was excited.
It's been an hour and 43 minutes from start to finish. Let's real quick go into our closing the show page. So folks, on the screen right now, you should see all the places that you can find Tellest out there on the internet. Tellest.com is the first place that you should go to because it'll bring you to all of our other projects. But we do have 3 premium sites that you can visit. Patreon.com/Tellest is where you can go to find digital versions of our battle maps. We release things related to the battle maps on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We've got a lot more coming soon, so do be sure to check that out. Tellest.etsy.com is where you can find physical versions of the maps, as well as we've got stickers, bookmarks, the books, the tabletop game, the Tellest art book, and Rihanna's magic wands. BattleMapFantasy.com will bring you to Drive-Thru RPG, where you can buy the maps one-off, and you can bring them into like your Roll20 campaigns and things like that. We also have a couple of TikTok channels. TikTok.com/@TalesOfTellest is where you can find our doggies. They add a little bit of magic to our lives, so we're happy to share that with you as well. TikTok.com/@WeirdWitchWands is where Rihanna makes the magic of her own. She makes one-of-a-kind handcrafted magic wands that are great. I would imagine that it's not just going to be Weird Witch Wands anymore, right? Like, you're going to show off some of the other things soon,
for
too.
Sure, yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff going on. We've got...
I'm better at wand creating than I am at sketching schools.
We've got 2 new live events coming up soon. Witchtober Market, which is October 26th. So we're excited to show some of her new crafts there. And then in November, I'm going to be doing a author fair in Doylestown. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the other 2 places that we'll bring to your attention, youtube.com/@WorldOfTellest is where you can find all these videos after Twitch knocks us off the platform, after the requisite amount of days that we're allowed to be on here. But twitch.tv/ThatTellest guy is the only place that you can follow us live, earn your quest coins, all that good stuff. So make sure that you check us out here first. And with that, it's been an hour and 45 minutes. It's time to say goodbye, but we're thankful that we were able to talk about something so passionately for such a long time tonight, and bring that content to our listeners. But in the meantime, we're gonna head out, and we'll miss you.